Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're digging into one of the most intensely guarded secrets of ancient Greece, the women-only festival of the Thesmophoria. We're going to uncover a really fascinating historical paradox that took place in what was arguably one of the most strictly patriarchal societies in all of human history.
So, to set the stage here, think about the number 120. Ancient Greek calendars boasted roughly 120 days of festivals every single year, and the vast majority of those were largely reserved for male citizens. But there was one event, just this single, hyper-secretive women's festival, that managed to turn this entire society completely upside down for a few days every autumn.
It begs a pretty wild question, right? What actually happens when the most oppressed members of a society suddenly take over the government headquarters? Well, let's dive into exactly that. We're going to explore a world that ancient Greek men were violently forbidden from seeing, a space where women held ultimate, undisputed authority. And listen, when I say violently forbidden, I mean it literally. If a guy dared to spy on these secret rites, the consequences were, well, absolutely brutal. Historical lore tells us about the legendary King Battus of Cyrene, who is reportedly castrated by furious disciples of the cult just for spying on their sacred rites. Or take the famed Messenian hero Aristomenes. Now, this was a guy known for fighting fierce Spartans, yet he was knocked completely senseless by women wielding sacrificial spits and knives.
Section 1. A strictly man's world.
To really grasp how shocking this role reversal was and why men were so terrified of intruding, we have to understand the baseline reality for these women. For most of the year, a citizen wife faced daily, strict domestic isolation. They were basically considered lifelong minors. They were confined to the home, totally barred from the public sphere, and incredibly forbidden from even buying groceries because they just weren't trusted with financial transactions. But during the Thesmophoria, total 180. These same women were suddenly autonomous, highly public, and wielding sacrificial instruments of death. They were allowed to perform animal sacrifices, which was a central religious duty normally strictly reserved for men.
Section 2. The Great Reversal.
Now here is where it gets truly fascinating. The festival physically displaced the most powerful male politicians in the polis. The women didn't just quietly go out into the woods. They went right to the heart of male power. During the festival, women physically occupied the political headquarters of their cities. In Athens, they took over the Plinix, which was the prominent hill where the male democratic assembly met. In Thebes, they took over the ancient Cadmea. The historian Xenophon actually recorded that the male governing body, the boule, literally had to pack up and relocate to the portico of the agora. For those few days, the women ran a totally ad hoc, female-only democracy, handling all the decisions, planning, and accounting without any male counsel whatsoever.
And you can bet the male paranoia surrounding this female takeover was just off the charts. It was actually humorously captured in Aristophanes' comedy The Thesmophoriazeae, which translates to Women of the Thesmophoria. In the play, the famous playwright Euripides is terrified for his life. He is entirely convinced that the women are using their secret assembly to plot his murder because he wrote villainous female characters. It's a perfect snapshot of this deep patriarchal anxiety over women congregating with absolute autonomy.
Section 3. 3 days of secrecy.
So let's get into the actual rituals and see how this all built into an extraordinary event honoring the goddesses Demeter and Persephone to guarantee a fertile harvest. The whole thing unfolding over 3 distinct autumn days, perfectly mirroring the myth of Demeter mourning her kidnapped daughter Persephone before finally celebrating her return. Day 1 was the Anados, or ascent, where women left their homes and ascended to the sacred sites. Day 2 was the Nestia, a solemn day of fasting and mourning where they'd sit on the ground to mirror Demeter's grief. And finally, Day 3 was Kalligonia, a day of vibrant celebration, fair birth, and praying for human and agricultural fertility.
Now, a really visceral, super secretive part of these rites centered around something called the Megaron. These were essentially deep caverns or pits that symbolically represented Demeter's womb.
Let's walk through exactly what went down in these pits because it's pretty intense. Specially purified women known as bailers, who actually had to maintain strict ritual purity for 3 days prior, would descend into these dark caverns. Their job? To retrieve the completely rotten remains of piglets that had been sacrificed and thrown down there previously. They'd haul this decayed matter up to the altars and mix it with highly symbolic fertility items. We're talking dough baked into the shapes of snakes and phalluses, along with pine cones, which were known for being incredibly prolific. This created a macabre, divine compost that farmers would later mix directly with their seed corn to magically invoke a bountiful harvest.
Then on the final day, things lightened up a bit with something called isologia. Basically, this was a ritualized exchange of crude, sexually explicit jokes, mockery, and suggestive language among the women. It was rooted in the myth of the servant Iambe trying to make the grieving Demeter smile, and this vulgar joking was actually believed to magically stimulate fertility and break the immense tension of their fasting.
Section 4. Unearthing the Rituals. Now, you might be wondering, if men were strictly forbidden from attending, under threat of severe violence, how do we actually know what happened? Well, beyond literary clues and some marginal notes from ancient scholars, archaeologists have literally dug up the proof. At the Cadmea in Thebes, excavations revealed votive statuettes of female participants alongside terracotta piglets and boars. Finding these physical items right at the site of the festival grounds, those bizarre, secret literary descriptions into solid historical reality. It proves the women were absolutely there and that piglets were central to their worship.
They also found some highly curious artifacts. For example, a fragment of a broken male figure wearing a cloak accompanied by a snake was found right smack in the middle of this female-only site. Scholars believe this hints that the Theban sanctuary saw itself closely connected to broader Demeter mystery cults, like the Eleusinian Mysteries, which actually did allow men. It just goes to show a complex web of religious practice where this exclusive women's space still acknowledged the wider mythological landscape.
Section 5. A feminine consciousness. So, what does this all mean? Why did this brief window of absolute power actually matter for the women of ancient Greece? Well, because these citizen wives were so heavily isolated in their individual homes for the rest of the year, this festival provided a rare, incredibly vital space. By coming together without men, they forged an independent community. But more practically, they shared crucial, life-saving knowledge. Sources indicate that women, ever since the Neolithic era, held specialized knowledge of medicinal plants. At the Thesmophoria, they could safely share information on managing their reproductive health, everything from natural contraception and abortion to maternal health and delivery. In an era where childbirth was incredibly dangerous, this secret networking was literally a matter of life and death.
It really highlights the ultimate irony of their situation. By leaning into their unique religious association with agricultural and human fertility, the very thing the state desperately needed them for, these women managed to completely bypass patriarchal restrictions. They carved out an autonomous zone to forge a powerful, independent feminine consciousness, finding true empowerment through the one single avenue the state could not deny them.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to consider. Did the very system that oppressed these women by pushing them out of the public sphere and strictly segregating the genders inadvertently hand them the tools for their own hidden empowerment? By forcing them to rely on their exclusive fertility rituals, the men of ancient Greece essentially gave their wives the perfect cover to share secrets, govern themselves, and wield ultimate power over their own lives and bodies, even if it was just for a few days a year. It's an amazing look at how suppressed voices always seem to find a way to speak. I hope this gives you a whole new perspective on the ancient world. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning history.